Okay, hello everyone. Yeah, it's okay. Hello, good afternoon everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the first talk of the Physics Society under this new vertical that we started this year on inclusivity and diversity and so on. Under this initiative, we aim to promote the awareness of the namesake topics of inclusivity, diversity through a series of lectures as well as articles to increase awareness of these issues among students of the sciences. So a lot of you know about the survey that we are doing, so this talk sort of supplements what we aim to do. So the scientific research communities suffer from great social issues, and these tend to be largely swept under the rug, and most of us are not aware of them because we're not students of the social sciences, right? We don't read about these things and so on. So this makes it all the more important for these issues to be brought into the forefront. So today we have Mr. Ankur Paliwal, and he'll be talking about why you should care about diversity and inclusion in science. So before we start the talk, I'll introduce our speaker. He's currently an independent journalist who writes about science, inequity, and the LGBTQ plus community. He holds a master's degree in science journalism from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism in New York, and is a fellow at the Entrepreneurial Journalism Creators Program at the City University of New York. His writings cover a vast array of subjects, but focus on these common themes of reporting the stories of communities and ideas that are otherwise neglected by mainstream journalism. He's the founder of Queerbeat, a collaborative journalism project focused on the LGBTQ plus community in South Asia. His recent works include the study of caste in elite universities in India that I had shared around the society a while ago. The format of this talk would be as follows. So I would first give a short presentation on the topic, followed by an informal discussion on the same. With that, I'd like to invite you.
You guys can hear me all right? Or do I need a mic? This is all right? Okay. Thanks for the introduction. I'm very glad to be here. Very excited. I've never been to St. Stephen's, so it's my first time. Be kind to me. I just want to begin with some disclaimers. I'm not an expert. Although it seems like a talk, I want this to be a discussion. I'm just a writer, a journalist who is trying to understand issues. There are so many things I do not understand. So you might have very deep questions. I may not be able to answer all of them deeply. I'll try and answer as much as it's just whatever my understanding allows. Also, this is not a captive audience. If I bore you, feel free to move out. I hold no grudges, so just feel no pressure. Chill. It's a chill talk. So I'd be talking about why you should care about diversity and inclusion in science. And just want to first start with how many are you from science? Just if you could raise hands. Okay. So almost everyone is from the sciences, that's good. I guess humanities people probably know things, yeah. Anyway, yeah. This subject is very close to me. I've been writing about it because I've been trying to understand it. And I don't fully understand it, even after writing for a couple of years on this. I first want to begin with this question: who gets to do science? And I'll explain it through my talk. Gets to do is the central question here. Who gets to come to St. Stephen's? Who gets to go to IITs? Who gets to go to IASCs? Who gets to go to JNUs? And what are the factors that determines that? I'll share this figure with you. I recently did a study collecting data over several months from some of the very top institutes in India, including IITs, IASCs, TIFR, names that you hear very often. Also, slightly more diverse ones, not as elite, like PHU and JNU. This data, by the way, is not public. None of these places are releasing this data to tell you that how bad we are. I collected all this data through Right to Information Act to figure out what's the uh, diversity scene in these places. I started on this question because I've been writing about science for quite some time. I've been going to universities and talking to students. And a lot of time this question, especially when I would talk to Dalit and Adivasi or Bahujan students, there was one thing that they would always tell me, almost everybody would tell me, there is nobody like me here. But why does that matter? There are professors, other professors you can talk to. Why this like me matters so much? So I would ask them, why does it matter? If you have a problem, just go to your professor and ask them. They said, we go to our professors and ask them, but they don't get me. Why don't they get them? Because they're not like them. And by that I mean they don't come from the places, the lived experiences of those communities. When you are Dalit or Adivasi, it means something. You come from a place, you come from experiences, which if you try and explain a privileged caste professors, they might be, however progressive they claim to be, they won't get it. It's not their experience. So this is the pathetic situation of the institutions. Less than 1% professors from Dalit and Adivasi communities and some of the really top ones. And if you look at TIFR, it's a 2020 data because I've been collecting since then. Nobody. It's all of a caste, or privileged caste. And then I started, I thought that maybe I should meet this 1%. I struggled a lot, reached out to professors I could find, and all of them told me, look, I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you, you're a journalist. And it took me, I had to go through my own struggle to reach here. I can't jeopardize it by talking to you. The institutional heads are not going to like it. So nobody speak to me. But I do want to show you faces of people who are from this 1%. Sonachari, she is not in any of these institutions because she couldn't get to these institutions. She is one of the top computer scientists in India and is now the Vice Chancellor of Silo Kanu Murmu University in Dhaka, in a university where people from that region, where she would understand the experiences of people from that region. So that's an Adivasi dominated region. And there are several interesting things that Dr. Min says, which I'll discuss with you later. Dr. Rao Sahab Kale, he's retired now, studied and taught in JNU. Very interesting story, which I'll elaborate when I get to Kale. Or maybe I should just say it right away. It was a very hard journey for Kale, who comes from Beed district in Madhya Pradesh, to first get to JNU, struggling there, and then getting to the assistant professor position. The moment he became an assistant professor in JNU, what did he do first thing? What he did is that he called all the teachers in Beed and in nearby areas. I am the assistant professor now in JNU. These are the application forms distributed to all the students. I will take care. I want them to come here. I do not think, I'm fairly convinced, nobody else would have done that. He did it because he knew what obstacles or barriers people from his region or his community would face. He got the opportunity and he wanted to use it. Those students would come to New Delhi railway station. He would go personally, bring all of them, 5-7 students, have them stay at his house, help them prepare for the PhD exams or masters and whatever, and help them clear the exams, and they would get into JNU. That would not have happened. Those 5 students would not have got into JNU if Kale wasn't there. That's why representation matters. You care about your people. It's just a truth of life. This is the recent study that I did, which was published in Nature, and my talk is largely about that. How India's caste system limits diversity in science. There are a couple of charts that I will show. Feel free to interrupt me whenever. I'll first begin from the school level and see what happens when you reach the professor state where Kale and Sonacharya were there. This is the undergrad level data that I collected from Higher Education Survey, which is put out by Indian government every year. But for some reason, after 2020, it has not been put out. The reasons are going to be government. So you'd see that one thing is pretty clear from this graph is that Dalits and Adivasi students at this level are taking arts more and not science as much. Whereas if you look down at the privileged communities data, it's fairly decent representation. Medicine is just like all dominated by privileged castes, and I'll show you more data. That made me, I had this hypothesis that they might be taking arts, but when I looked at the data, it was proven. So then I started asking around, why are they taking arts more? I went to Sonacharya and Sonacharyas and Kales of India. And there were a couple of things that they told me. Both of them come from, and others like them, come from in other words, backward places of India. They told me, and other students I spoke with who are now from those regions, is that it's not that I love art. It's not that I love humanities. It's what they're getting to do, which means the nearest college from their village is an arts college. Or most of the teachers in that college are arts teachers. That's where they get to go, and that's what they get to study. But there are some students who want to go to science colleges. Now, what are the barriers there? साइकिल लेनी पड़ेगी? नहीं. बस का खर्चा देना पड़ेगा? नहीं है. वापस, do you guys understand Hindi? Everybody understand Hindi? Okay. Or you'll have to come back from your educational institute or the college you're going to and help your dad in the farm or help your mother. Can't do it if you are living away. So that's what you get and that's what you study. That's one reason. There have been some efforts by state governments in India to make sure that science teachers go to these schools. But science teachers are in towns, they don't want to go to villages for the reasons that we can fairly assume why that is happening. Another reason that a lot of Dalit education professors told me, Adivasi education professors told me, is that they don't have role models in their families. Even in their extended family networks, koi chacha, mama, koi nahi hai, who could tell, I studied science, this is how you do it, these are the exams you take, and this is the coaching institute that you go to if you can afford. That's coaching institutions are another drama that we can talk about later. There is nobody to guide them. The fees tend to be higher just because there are practical exams. And just that difference of the practical exam fee is a barrier for a lot of students. So then most of them end up in art schools. There are some who would cross those barriers or would be in towns. And that's where this master's data come in. It's almost the same. You'd still see a fairly higher representation in arts in comparison to science, medicine, technology. But for privileged communities, it's slightly different. Science is more. Medicine is 72%. So what's happening at the master's level now? This is all what I've collected by talking to teachers and students. A lot of them, if they get to go to the master's level, there was this guy I followed in my story Samadhan. He comes from a village close to Nashik district. He's the first person from his village close to Nashik who has just started the PhD last year. He's the first person in the entire village to get to do this. So a lot of them are first learners in their family, and the arts college that they went to or the nearby science college they could go to, teachers didn't pay enough attention to them, which they needed. They needed more attention. So when they come to big universities like TU or Pune University where he went, or in universities like that where it's, I mean, a lot of privileged students are coming, privileged teachers are there, they feel lost. There are no support systems in places like this to help them not feel lost. Practicing science is one thing, and the culture of science is a bigger problem, which limits people from practicing science, certain people from practicing science. When they get to these institutes, the coursework is so much for them, they don't know how to handle it. And which is where the question comes, is that there is nobody like me here I could go to and say, sir, I don't understand it, it's too much for me. And Kale and Sonajaya would get it because they come from there. But when they go to teachers and professors and say, I don't get it, but Baki log to kar rahe hain. Other students are saying it, tumhe kya problem? And that's a discouragement they get. Sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's non-verbal. So there's absolute lack of support. There are caste and caste markers through these institutes, which again reminds them of where they come from. It's English, biggest barrier. Most of us in these institutes tend to speak English, teachers speak English, Hindi mein bula karo thoda, or. To make your spaces empathetic, to make them diverse, to include others. Don't put this pressure on people to speak in English. It's a massive pressure. If you talk to them, you'll get it. The kind of clothes you wear is a cultural marker, which reminds them, I don't have it. So they start feeling alienated. A lot of them tend to group together. I don't have the figures right now because nobody is collecting these figures, but because of all these reasons, they drop out and go back or take up a job. Don't study. These are all cultural problems. Now, some of them, it's a draft that is happening. The pipeline is leaking and the holes are getting bigger and bigger at each stage. There's a sharp decline at PhD level. You look at the gray bars, it's all privileged communities. And you look at the blue, the orange, the red. On an average, 10% representation of Dalits and just 2% by Adivasis. at these levels. And these are all elite institutes. What's happening here? PhD is a nightmare for so many people. I mean, doing it is one, and going through the culture of it is another. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I've understood. A lot of students and professors spoke of selection committee bias, which means that when they sat for these interviews, and the selection committee asked them questions, they said, "Samajh nahi aaya," question. And nobody made the effort to explain them again or ask, "Kya samajh nahi aaya? Can I simplify it?" So there is no effort that is happening from the selection committee side. Or they would start comparing students, say somebody has come from Stephens. Very eloquent people here. Speak in English, can present whatever they want to present. In 10 minutes, crisp presentation. And that will win the heart of most of the professors in the selection committee. If somebody else who is coming from Nashik, Samadhan is coming from Nashik, he's fumbling in English, is nervous. This institution will make lots of Samadhans nervous. So he's fumbling, he's nervous, he's not able to answer, he's not able to articulate. And the professor is losing interest already, without understanding. And a lot of teachers themselves told me that, off the record, that fellow professor or a relative recommended that student, so I took. So these recommendation networks are just, these are task network essentially, which pull in people like them and exclude others. Or through these recommendation networks, the family networks I spoke about earlier, is that you figure out, and also because you come from the Stephens of the world, I'm not targeting you guys, yeah, just see it as, it's places like yours. They would figure out or have the confidence, you guys are confident people. You have the confidence to go to the website of an institution you want to apply in, see who are the professors, who is studying what, and just write. Look, I am so-and-so studying in St. Stephen's, getting great grades. I want to study applied mathematics and whatever I want to do X with that, and the professor will get impressed because you have the language for it. A lot of students who are Dalit and Adivasi don't have the confidence. It's not that there's a problem with them, it's the problem of the culture. There's just so much nervousness and the systems around them don't support that. And the professor would have taken that St. Stephen Ladki or Ladka because it's applied mathematics and it's great language. Another reason is that if I am a professor in a big institute, I'm also functioning in an environment where I have to publish or perish. So whom do I want? I want that St. Stephen ki ladki or ladka that who will help me because he's so sharp. Help me to get to the next level. And if I take somebody on whom I have to spend more time, more effort, whom I think will take more of my time, I don't have it. You're not going to help me. You're a sucker of my time. I don't have to give. Yeah. So a lot of students I spoke with who are doing PhD or trying to do PhD in these elite institutions told me there's a common struggle that you will, when you talk to them, you will get. When I approached a supervisor, or when a supervisor was allotted to me, they were not interested. A, first in taking me, but if it was the institutional pressure to take diverse students, which is on some professors, they were not interested in teaching me or giving me time, or started discouraging me. So again, they don't get the support and start dropping out. The same problem I spoke about earlier, this lack of role models. If there were more Kales and there were more Sonajariya Minzes, students would just feel so comfortable. Madam, take me. I've come from Jharkhand. I've come from this place. I am an Adivasi. I want to learn more, understand more. I don't know it now, but I can work hard. And Sona Jharia will get it because she has gone through it. And will give the extra time. Which is why representation matters, which is why diversity matters and inclusion matters. The nightmare continues in so many other ways. There's little incentive for supervisor to pay attention, which I just talked about. It's a publish or perish environment. I want the brightest. So a lot of Dalit, Adivasi and Bahujan teachers who are at assistant professor level or associate professor level told me, Professor to koi ban nahi pa raha hai waise bhi. Told me that what's the point of the reservation policies or affirmative action then? What it is doing, it's getting the student to start the PhD. That's it. But if the culture of these institutions, which is the lack of diversity, inclusion, and equity, is dissuading the student, then what's the point of reservation? The student is going to drop out, and a lot of them drop out because of the lack of support systems. So it's a huge question mark on a lot of people will tell you, and I agree with, this affirmative action policy is extremely important. It will, because what it does, it gets you in. But now we need to do the next thing, to retain them, which nobody is interested in. Oh, by the way, I must add, or even on the reservation policies things, institutions are openly flouting the rules, openly violating the rules. Nobody is adhering to it because the government is not asking. So yeah, flout as much. Faculty numbers we have already looked at. It's the horrible data. Underrepresentation at the faculty level. At IITs and ISCs, 98% of professors are from privileged communities. Almost same, 90% for assistant and associate professor level. TFR, as I said earlier, 100%. 100%. If you go to an equivalent of this would be just a white institution in the US or in the UK, just white. And you can just determine everything from there. What are they thinking about? What are they doing? Same things that are happening at the PhD level are happening here too. The selection committee bias I spoke of. A lot of Dalit and Adivasi associate professors and professors told me what they believe now is that how you fix the problem is that just because the candidate has reached the interview stage and however they perform, you take them in. Because what the selection committee, the wrong selection committee is committing or doing is that they start comparing that candidate with somebody who has come from, has a degree from a foreign university or a better university and is eloquent, can present in 10 minutes, crisp presentation and all of that. So you just take them in and then create systems of support within those institutions to help them understand their subjects better. Or if they want understanding of how to write grants better, or any other thing that they need help with, and then help them sort of like move forward in their career. Those systems don't exist. And those are the systems we need. I mean, this data is horrible. This is funding data. generally government Department of Science and Technology or Biotech, a lot of them are not collecting this caste data when they are getting applications or funding applications from researchers in India from the institutes. But some of them are. There's some data which I could get through right to information. If there was no right to information, which Modi ji is trying to, whatever, we wouldn't get any of this. The reality. You see, it's 80% just privileged communities. All the money is going to them. What is also determining the success of professors in these institutions is, are they able to get funding? Funding is such, I don't need to tell you guys, if you want to progress in your field, whatever research you want to do, without funding, you can't do it. You don't have the lab, you don't have the reagents or whatever else you need, and the support. Your research just stops if you don't have the funding. So who is getting to do research? The earlier question I asked is all privileged communities, because they are getting the funding. Why are others not getting the funding? Nobody knows. Maybe it's the selection bias which is operating in some way. Again, those crisp applications which some people get to write, others don't. Sonacharya and Kale, both of them told me, and both of them reached a professor position, is that they never got funding from the Indian government. Never, not even once. They wrote many grant applications. They are not less in any way from whoever is getting the funding, but they never got the funding from the Indian government. Whatever funding they could get was from outside institutions or other funding agencies. Sonacharya asked these grant makers many times, wrote letters, why am I not getting the funding? I mean, tell me the reason. What am I not writing in my application, which I can write, and I'll do it, I'll improve my application? No responses. So the government or these grant makers are not even telling people what to do. So that's another problem. I just want to share some experiences. It's just like I'll take 5 more minutes and then I'll take questions or we'll discuss things. These are the experiences I've collected after talking to people. And this first one is from Delhi University. Very recent. Very recent. I'm not going to name the department, but it's very adjacent to your department. Yeah. Or physics, I must say. Yeah. Physics adjacent. This Adivasi student, female, has come through affirmative action, goes to the professor she wants to work with, this privileged caste, takes a look and says, oh, you're a quota candidate. Can you do that? Just go to this guy, that guy. I'm full, I don't have vacancy, but quota candidate. Kahin bhi ho jayega. Just go inside. Just go to anywhere. So what did that professor do? Reminded her that you are a quota candidate. You don't deserve to work with me. Or you have come from an unfair advantage. These are the reminders that she got. She ended up with a Dalit professor. Although, because there were no Adivasi professors, the Dalit professor got her experiences. That's why when they say that there is nobody like me is important. The privileged caste professor dissuaded her, told her that you're a quota candidate, reminded her that you're not welcome here. The Dalit professor just took her. I don't need to explain these things. you would know. Almost all the Dalit and Adivasi and OBC researchers at whatever level, whether it was at master's, PhD, faculty level I spoke with, all of them spoke of this intense pressure that they constantly felt to prove themselves in these upper caste institutions, which were constantly reminding them that you're not supposed to be here. Science is so much about making mistakes. That's how you progress in science. You just make constant errors. That's how you progress. But they have so much fear of making mistakes. Because if they do, they fear that they're proving them, privileged professors, right, that इनको कुछ नहीं आता. It's not the mistake of that student, it becomes the mistake of that community. So they can't really do science, which means they can't make mistakes. Sonacharya says the playing field is not equal at any stage. And I want to leave you with this one last quote from Samadhan. I interviewed him a couple of times. But he told me, "Bhaiya, mera pura naam hai." And I asked him, why shouldn't I? He said that if I give my last name, everybody is going to figure out that I've progressed through quota, and that means I'm not hardworking, I'm not studying well, and I don't want that to be attached to my name, my progress. And I spoke to him for hours about what affirmative action means to him, diversity means to him, a lot of things that I discussed in this story. He said that, look, all that is fine and I understand, but for me, the real marker of change would be the day when I'm able to say my full name without hesitation. When I can say Samadhan X in these elite institutions, I would know that equality has arrived. And it's a culture problem. It's a problem, it's a science culture problem, which is not letting Samadhan say his full name. So you guys need to introspect. If there is a Samadhan amongst you, or comes amongst you, would she or would he be able to say their full name? And everything that comes with that. Which is why diversity and inclusion is important. That was about caste, now my plugs. I'm from an LGBTQIA community. I'm gay. I write about science. Although, everything that I spoke of earlier in relation to caste largely applies to us too. Again, it's about culture. There is real dichotomy between arts and science. We feel it. If I go to a humanities college, if I go to an arts college, I see a lot of people like me. I move around easily, but I can't do it in science. Or people like me can't do it in science. I've studied in a science university. But I could never come out. Because the image of a scientist or the image of a researcher is a cis heterosexual male in most cases. Privileged too. Science also seems very masculine to me, or people like me. Why is that? We need to introspect. Like I earlier talked about no role models, we don't have role models. If I would have seen, when I was doing my BSc, which I did in zoology, if I would have seen a lesbian professor, I would have worshipped her. But I didn't see her. She was not in my institution. So all the struggles I was going through, or like I said, I was wasting a lot of my cognitive energy in acting straight and acting masculine. It was a science place. My grades were tanking. If a professor was teaching or was interviewing or had given us assignments and I had 10 hours, or the students had 10 hours to complete it, 3 hours I was just constantly trying to make sure, am I sitting straight? Am I looking like a man? Or other pressures that I was dealing with. I couldn't perform to the best of my ability because the culture didn't let me and because there was no lesbian professor, there was no gay professor. Otherwise, I would have gone to them, to their chamber, spoken to them. I would have felt at ease. And now I'll give you a complete contrast. This is India. I love India. But when I went to New York, oh my God. I mean, in the campus, on the subways, everywhere, I was studying science writing. Everywhere I saw people like me. I saw so many lesbians, I saw so many gays who were wearing their badge on their sleeves. I could just walk up to my lesbian professor and say that, look, this is what I want to understand, I'm feeling this and that. And I came out pretty late in my life. I'm not going to tell my age, but pretty late in my life. And I could do it in New York. I could do it in Columbia University. It's one of the most elite universities in the world. But why I could do it? Because it was diverse, because it was inclusive. Which is where now we need to introspect again. The university just eased it off me, just eased it. Why you should care? Just 2 more minutes, bear with me. Because science is done by people. We ask questions. The kind of questions we ask are shaped by the experiences that we have grown up with. There's not enough data right now, or this whole issue of actually diversity and inclusion is very recent. So we don't have enough data to show if a diverse group does science or does physics, would the outcome look different? We don't know that for sure now. It may or may not. What data or anecdotal experiences we have right now from the studies that are done on diverse teams, diverse groups in science, biology, chemistry, technology, is that the nature of inquiry changes. The nature of questions change. The dimensions change. There is an expansion of the question. Whatever question you are trying to understand changes. So science changes in so many ways. And a diverse and inclusive science is better science because it will benefit a diverse society, which is our real situation. Because right now, what the science, I mean, a lot of you'll see if you go back, you go to PubMed or other places and look for studies. Historically, lots of studies done by scientists have so many issues and didn't benefit people because there was an underrepresentation of marginalized communities. So they didn't think of the problems that they were facing. Or if they needed, or they produced so many in agriculture, it's just, it's agriculture and health is just full of it. They would, the food scientists or the agriculture scientists would create a crop, a robust crop, which would appeal to everyone but not to certain communities because it didn't taste well, it wasn't researched in those communities, they were never using it, or had cultural barriers against that. But nobody bothered. So, largely what a diverse and inclusive science do, it will expand your inquiry, make it inclusive, and it's more likely to benefit the society. You can't say the same for a non-diverse group. And just last thing is that diverse and inclusive places are just better and empathetic places. We get each other, we understand each other, we stand up for each other, we help each other. The physics you do is secondary, or the chemistry you do is secondary. First, get to know each other. And when you get to know each other, when we are together, when the spaces are diverse. Otherwise, I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, we both live in South Delhi. Yeah, and that's the problem. Thank you so much for your time. This is my email, that's my Twitter, reach me anytime. I'll just, also like no presentation is over without a shameless plug, and I have one. I've just recently, and Vedanta talked about the project, I've just started a new project. It's called Queer Beat. It's writing about the LGBT community in India. Queerbeat.org is the website. Go look for stories. We just did a story on how LGBT community experiences aging. It's very different from how a lot of people in this room would age. The idea is to tell these stories from small town India, also just make the media space more diverse, because we're not seeing stories, our stories, accurate stories, empathetic stories in the media space right now. That's all from me. That's it. Forgive me if I bored you.
Okay, you can ask questions, otherwise I can start with mine otherwise. Because I have a lot, so someone else should start. Yeah.
So we talked about selection.
Yeah, don't start me. That's not good. Yeah. Yeah.
So, especially in science, many selection procedures hold up merit as a primary deciding factor for who gets selected or not. But we know we can't really define merit without factoring in the upbringing and like the social background of a person. So, is there a need for like redefining merit or like getting rid of merit as a deciding factor at all in selection procedures?
Yeah, merit is a bogus concept. So it should be completely done away with. We need to ask different questions. We need to ask a question: who is a good teacher? What makes a good teacher? And what are the criteria that are we going to look at when we are selecting a good teacher? A good teacher is not the person who has the best qualification, who can explain you physics well. A good teacher is a person who would connect with most students in the room, who would encourage most students in the room. A good teacher is a person who would tell the Adivasi PhD student, I'll take you. These are the criteria that need to come into. Merit is just that recommendation network I talked about, that's merit.
Yeah. I came in pretty late, so I apologize if
That's fine.
this
That's
has
fine.
already been covered. We already know that STEM is unfavorable to women per se. There's an exclusionary based criteria. While STEM demands a hyper masculine cishet norm from men, on the opposite hand, it demands a complete asexualization from women, a certain like defeminization of women in STEM for them to be taken seriously. Like, is this like again a conscious move to remove women from these spaces, or to remove feminization in any form from these spaces?
Yeah. My understanding is that it has been a historical problem, because historically science was done by cis heterosexual men who defined the culture of science, and they were getting to do science, who gets to come into science. And that history made science masculine. I don't think that earlier it was a conscious move to keep women out. Of course, we know we have many examples, and required a certain masculinity out of women. But I think now, which is why, why this talk, although it was about largely based on caste, but applies to gender too. I think science can be totally feminine. I mean, it can be totally gay. What it needs is that it needs you. It needs you to come into the system to get more people like you. The earlier example I gave of our professor who made a conscious decision to send application form to his community back in Beed to get those students. This is what you will do.
Just a follow-up, do you also think within spaces of science there is engendering of certain courses like biology or nursing, although within science they are seen as more feminine and therefore have more ratio of women opting for those courses as opposed to say like quantum physics or I don't know like technical science
Quantum physics is right, I guess.
I don't know.
It's totally right.
Some
I can tell
stats
you.
that
Yeah. I mean, I think I have the same answer to this question. Historically, the quantum physics or the applied mathematics or some kind of chemistry was just done by men more often, and they defined who gets to come here. I remember one study, or actually a couple of studies. It's not that women don't come into these spaces. Women do come into these spaces, but because they are so hyper masculine, there is stereotyping by the male professors, which keeps them out. There are so many examples, and I remember one now, is that if there is an assignment which requires a group of students to perform an experiment, the women were given a softer task. Collect this data, maintain an Excel sheet, and things like that, talk to the person. And the hardcore experimenting was assigned to men. And this stereotyping reminded women that they were women and cannot do the hard experiment, and they quit. So you are in some ways right that there is, I don't know if it's a conscious effort, but it's an unconscious being a man, understanding, and this is how it comes out, is that this is how it operates. Men just need to be trained. Just to be more inclusive and sensitive, and just understand the culture more. I think the science has a huge, massive culture problem, which it needs to solve. It can solve the space science and whatever it wants to do, but it first needs to solve the culture problem. And if you solve the culture problem, you'll do so much better science.
But the STEM is also promoting women's sciences because there's a special cell to look into the progress of the women and the number of women who are there in the STEM section. And it's also because the women are basically dropping down because of the social circumstances, the family pressures, and they're not able to handle those pressures at times. Yes, there is obviously male dominance will be there. That comes because of the history, especially in India. It is there, but of course there are also other reasons.
You're absolutely right. And I feel like which is why we need support systems. If a female scientist needs, it's fine, let it fall.
I just put it up on the table now.
Needs those support systems to, if there are more family requirements at home, we need to figure out ways to still retain women scientists.
And this is just a social problem which comes it's not only in physics, as you say, it is there. If you actually go to hospitals, the female doctors, they're most of the time taken as nurses by the normal people, general backward classes. They are always, no, I will talk to the doctor. They never take them as the serious person that they
Right. I have just one comment to make there about the culture, whether it's in the hospitals or in scientific spaces. is that look at who the leader of the institution is. A culture of the space is determined, defined, and sustained by the leader. If the leader is inclusive and diverse, understands what inclusivity, diversity, and equity means, will go out of their way to make the spaces such that most communities and genders can thrive. It's a leadership problem. Your culture is also a leadership problem.
I just have one comment, which is about. So when I was looking at this, I was also thinking about the intrinsic issue of diversity versus the instrumental. Whereas, okay, we have the empathy and moral responsibility to have equity, inclusivity, and diversity in science, but the second problem which automatically comes to a scientist's mind is there going to be something instrumental here? Is the face of science, is scientific research, or what the progress of research is it going to change if we have a more diverse community? So if you actually look at studies, there are studies that show groups of diverse problem solvers clearly outperform high performance, small groups of high performance solvers. So that there is a full instrumental thing that shows that diverse groups perform a lot better. And that was one of the reasons that I just wanted to raise that.
That's good, that's good. And there are some studies which say that those studies and papers are so better they are cited more. And I mean, Nature published a study recently. There is more citations of those papers. Why there are more citations of those papers? Because they were better papers. Yeah. Ankur Paliwal. Yeah.
I had two questions.
Yeah.
First was that I'm not exactly from STEM, I'm from economics, which we like to boast that it is science.
Sure.
What I have noticed in my own experience and from my own community is that the widespread anti-reservation, which is basically a casteist rhetoric that you see so commonplace in institutions like my own college. What this leads to is a very internalized casteism in people from the minorities themselves, where they feel this need to wash away their own identity just to be taken seriously. They feel the need to say that, oh, I will not apply through SE quota. I have gotten here through general category just because just so they will be taken more seriously. How do you think their own washing away of their identity and not wanting to talk about it plays into how diverse spaces are?
Like I said earlier, it's a cultural problem. What the spaces like this and these elite institutions, they are denying Dalit and Adivasi people their identity assertion. And that's a huge problem. If I can't say, which I couldn't, that I'm gay, it's the institutional problem, it's not my problem. So it's very sad, and it has been happening historically, that Dalit and Adivasi people have to pass or they hide their names because of that, so that they can pass as upper caste people, or I was passing as a straight person. It's an institutional problem. So the institution again needs to become, that's why I say you should care about it, make your institutions diverse so that I can assert my identity. And how will I be able to assert my identity when there are more people like me? When 20 people, 50 people of like me will gather, will be a stronger force and will be able to assert. Right now, I'm not able to assert my identity because somebody else is outnumbered me. Yeah.
My second question is about you mentioned how this data was from 2020, not in the recent years. Another thing that has happened very recently is that our country and our government has doubled down on its obsession on merit. So how do you think that if this data was to be collected now, how do you think it will differ now that people are defined by a one CUET score?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the data has changed much. The institutions are still pretty casteist. I can just write it on a piece of paper or hang me if I'm wrong. Nothing has changed, and it's not going to change in the next 10 years.
I had a question about, so what we talked about earlier also, where we say that a lot of people come from the big cities, especially upper caste people, they don't think about caste until they, especially the science students, give entrance exams. science, and that's the first time they hear the concept of caste and reservation. So, I mean, I understand why we have reservation and all the affirmative action arguments, which makes sense. We need reservation. But do you think that the whole idea of reservation, there not being enough education at the school level for a lot of these people, is actually promoting casteism almost? Because the first thought that the upper caste then have is that they are getting it over me, and that's actually creating more hate than it might be helping. Maybe we need to educate them at a lower, a bit before level to explain it. But the fact that that's not there and that reservations is sort of forced upon thing, most people don't want. The government is not very supporting of it in a sense.
Right. The hate is real.
Yeah.
The hate is real. I was recently at IIT Madras, and we were talking about reservation there because that's what I talk about. And most of the questions from the upper caste students were that it is so unfair.
Yeah, exactly.
It is so unfair.
It's creating
yeah,
more hate.
I am working so hard, sir.
Yeah.
And still I'm not getting it because somebody else, because of the reservation they are getting it. So I mean, a lot of these institutions are extremely contested spaces right now. There's a lot of conflict going on. I don't have a clear answer to what can change this. One thing, as you said, is that just having more caste consciousness, making it schools from the earlier level, more caste conscious, having an understanding of equity, telling them that, look, for so many years, historically, you have been denying others opportunity. It's on you now to make space. So that education, I think, just on a practical level, there needs to be more extension of seats, teachers and stuff to accommodate more people. Those are the two things I can think of. I don't have a better answer for this. But what I can tell you, the hate is real.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of exemplified almost through the reservation.
And I think it's very important to also hold the government accountable in that sense to have more public universities open up spaces so that people who say that, oh, my All India rank was 2 and still I did not get admission into a college of my choice because reservation was in place. So it's really the government's fault that we don't have enough public institutions instead of, merit-dharis just going off on students who come from marginalized communities like that. Because to think that you people can still afford private institutions and people who come from marginalized, communities or marginalized castes cannot. That's their only option.
Right. Creating public institutions and creating good public institutions.
Yeah.
Because that's where the race is.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to, I mean, there are lots of institutions, but the problem is the good. Everybody wants to go to the best ranked ones.
This is about the ethics of conducting a survey. So we recently did a survey where we tried to gauge how much diverse our department is. So it could not be more intersectional because we can ask a person what their annual income is, we can ask what their religion is, but we can't really ask what a person's sexuality or their caste is because it would be politically incorrect for a person to go about asking that, even though we ensure anonymity. But is there a way to conduct such surveys or do such studies where we can?
I think the ethical way of conducting a survey is just to write in the survey that we would like to know, and if you can't tell, that's all right. But you gave them ethics is about giving options. You gave them the option to say, if you talk about anonymity, that's there too. But you can't solve anything that you can't measure. So you have to measure it. Whatever data you can get together with all the ethics in place, giving them options, ensuring anonymity and all these things. But measurement is important, otherwise you can't solve it.
That is actually what we did. We put caste as an optional question in the survey. But most people didn't fill it.
But asking such question to a very small group basically is basically identifiable actually in certain sense. So actually students don't come up with the right answer.
Yes. One of the problems
Unless it is a very big group that people don't identify what is one and the other end.
Right.
For a very small group actually it is really
So these surveys won't work unless the culture is inclusive and diverse. If the culture is inclusive and diverse, where there is identity assertion and is welcome, I'll come forward and say I'm gay or I'm Dalit. So again, you fix the culture first. Then your surveys will work and you won't worry about it.
I just want to share.
Yeah, sure.
It's not much of it. I'm
Of course.
from an SC community, so that means basically I come here with work done. So I've been asked a few questions regarding my community, and even my close friends would ask me. Why are there reservations? They still ask me. I was also asking myself.
Sure. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I've come up with a small like a short answer. Like, so I guess being here from experience, what I realized is that it's not about the lack of resources like finances or I think it's less of that. I think it's more about the lack of the human resources. As you have said earlier, there is no one to look up to. It's very hard to find someone of my own community coming here and getting success. So it's hard to find someone who we can relate to. And they kind of, in that sense, I fully understand it now. But yeah, so coming from someone so that no one asks me anymore about that. I just want to share one thing. So I came across a YouTube video, which was called "Why Are Left-Handed People? Why do left-handed people exist?" Okay.
It's great. Yeah, let's listen.
So,
Yeah.
as a left-handed person, also as a person part of a minority community, I kind of relate to it.
Yeah.
Because in that video they discuss two things. So the society works on two things mainly: competition and cooperation. When you just think of competition, it sounds fair. As a standalone, it sounds fair. As you just look at it, everyone gets a chance to compete. Everyone gets the same facilities.
Yeah.
They all get the chance to compete. Okay, standalone competition, it's fine. JDE, all this stuff, they look fine as a standalone. But when the problem comes for the minority community because of the cooperation part. Yes. So in a community where the majority is ruling, where the majority is building the system, the minority has to blend in to that system. So I'll give an analogy. Let's say, for example, I'll just use the left-handed as well.
Yeah.
Suppose I want to play a violin. So I have to use my left hand to play a violin, right? Now, why are there so less left-handed violinists? Okay, and why are there so less left-handed violins? Why are they all right-handed, right? Let's say because it's not beneficial for the manufacturers to make left-handed violins. There are a lesser number of left-handed people. So in a sense, I have to adjust myself so that I can use my right hand to play that violin. Or even when I go to a music school, I have to go there. I don't have access to a person who is left-handed. So the left-handed violinist cannot teach me. If the right-handed person keep teaching me, that means I have to do it the opposite way every single time. So I think that analogy fits well in my case as well.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to share that. And recently also I've been asked a question. I mean, it's not coming from a bad person or anything. They asked me whether I was from SD or not. I said yes, and the person said, so IT jam to IT jam to आराम से होगा.
Of course, yeah. आराम से होगा.
Are still there. So I just wanted to share.
Right. No, thanks so much for sharing, and I really like the left-handed example.
There's something actually applies because I tried to learn guitar. I'm also left-handed, and I was forced to learn right-handed.
Right. It's the same problem. I mean, like he said, that it's the majority makes and defines things.
It is on the other side who is present, it's very difficult. Like to give you an example, how
Yeah.
things are, and we are also like restricted by all means. Say example for the admission, we take interviews. There's a lot of students who come from Hindi speaking area.
Yeah.
Now they have the knowledge, but to test that knowledge, I am not empowered to test that knowledge because
Right.
I don't have that terminology to check those and to even get across. It was not
Yes.
from that side,
Yeah.
it was from this side to
Right.
get across to them and to explain what I want to ask
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
also difficult.
Absolutely. Which is why selection panels need to be diverse.
So it was like, even though we tried very hard, we would give them ample time, try to collect in simplest terms they could explain to us. But I'm sure there must be some hindrance in the process.
Things are getting lost. Things are getting lost because there are no people like me around me in that manner, on that manner. We're just coming back to the same. That's why representation and diversity. I'm always looking for my person, my people.
But even after this, I would also like to point out we have had many students who do not understand the language. There are a lot of students who do not understand English at all. We've had students of that kind. And then it needs the grit of the student, because that student has to survive in an environment. And many a times we've heard that I just want to leave this place
Exactly.
and go back.
Yeah.
But yes, there have been many who have really progressed a lot and have done well. I would also like to point out about that.
Yeah.
But that means it needs the grit of the person as well to
But
go
I
through
think
the
that
process.
grit is an unfair ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So I
because
think
then
a lot
they're
of-
handicapped,
No,
right? in that sense.
we are, I think, I'll tell you, no one, even if we try our best, we are there to help them. But they still have to live their own life. I can help them to the extent which is possible, or maybe go out of my way to help them to a certain extent. At the end of the day, it is their mental thing that is working 24 hours. You yourself said that I was putting that pressure on myself. Even though I would have been okay if you had come out with a statement, I would have said, okay, fine. But the pressure is that you created yourself. Okay, for that matter. I agree, I'm not trying to say-
I agree with you too.
So there has to be a two-way, translation that has to go on between the environment and the person and back to the person.
Right. I absolutely understand there should be two ways, but the more responsibility is on the institutional teacher. You have to do more.
Do you think a lot of these conversations end with just diverse people entering the institution? I feel that there's a lacuna of talk about what happens to these people once they access these spaces. Do you think these spaces are equally accessible to people from different from groups once you enter? I remember, as you said, predominantly we are an English-speaking body. Although there is a system to avail whatever courses that we're doing in Hindi, they do not exist in Hindi. We took a GE paper together, I don't know if you remember or not. There was this one person who wanted to take the GE paper in Hindi, and although that could have been done, that is permissible under the university, there was no reading material in Hindi. So
And this
Although-
man who wants to read about
Exactly.
feminism in Hindi.
in Hindi, we didn't have words to explain them in Hindi.
It's a pity.
It's a pity.
It's a pity.
And I think every time we do a survey, what we can do at Max is survey, how many people from STC communities do we have in college? But what about their experiences in college? Do they also translate in them getting equal opportunities after college? What about employment? What about higher education? What about teachers? I think nobody talks about on the other end, but like employability into colleges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is
And I
why we
think-
see that bottleneck, right? It gets tighter and tighter and tighter.
Yeah.
I think just to add to what Ishita has been speaking about, a very recent example of this student from IIT Bombay who was driven to suicide because he came from a marginalized caste background. I think whenever that happens to a student who comes from a privileged caste, who comes from an upper caste background, we open up this really big talk about mental health, but we never do that when it comes to a person who comes from a marginalized caste. We always, go on to say to people that, oh, they couldn't handle the pressure.
Yeah.
We place the onus of that mental health on the student, which we don't do with someone who comes from a privileged caste.
There's an
That's-
unnecessary burden on them not only to excel but also to make other people around them feel good. Like I know you didn't mean it in a bad spirit, but he said like, oh, his friend was not a bad person, or was not coming from
It's
bad
not your
space. But
responsibility.
why do we need to have the responsibility to say, oh no, my friend was not a bad person, but he just asked me what my caste background is? No.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. But there are so many unfair asks that marginalized communities people have to live through, and it shouldn't be like that. Everything that we talked about, all the comments that were shared, they're all about systemic problems at different levels, and which is why we had this talk, we had the discussion. When you go back to your classroom or your home, do something about it. I mean, don't come to the next stop and say the same things and just go back to your lives.
I think it's
Because-
really nice that the Physics Society came up with this inclusivity vertical in the first place.
Yeah. I mean,
Great.
exactly. Talk is good, discussion
Yes,
is good.
now we need the second part.
But I mean, if the second part doesn't happen,
Yeah.
talks are held, followed.
Yeah.
Doesn't help.
It's the awareness to action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to take a flow what you were discussing.
Sure.
So you shared a lot of experiences from other people today as well as your experiences. But I was thinking if we as people outside the community share their experiences, does it lose some of its authenticity as to when they share it? Because they do not get the platform to come here to share their experiences. And it's not ideal that we are also doing it for them. It is a good sense that we are spreading awareness, but
You're absolutely 100% right.
I think that comes to a larger question of what can we now do as an action, because we are not part of those communities.
Right.
So what can we do now, because we have power, we are in positions of power, what can we do with that power to fix some of these systemic issues?
Use your privilege.
Yeah.
Just use your privilege as much as you can. I had the privilege to conduct this study for nature, which I did. But I'm telling you, if a Dalit or Adivasi journalist had this opportunity to conduct this survey, would have been it. 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, you got me and got me to talk, but try and get people from the communities to share their experiences. I'm speaking on behalf of people sharing their experiences. You're absolutely right. Just have this week. It would be a much richer talk. You don't need a bridge like me. Is that all?
I think we're out of time as well.
Great.
Yes.
I hope I made sense.
Okay, so I'll just do the official vote of thanks business. So I'd like to thank Ankur for this amazing talk and for taking our time for this lecture today. It was truly an insightful session for all of us. Thank you, sir, and thank you everyone for coming. Students of science, students of the humanities, thank you for coming. And I hope that we will go ahead and we will. So, I mean, from the Physics Society side, we will push this through and we'll try to keep doing our best. I'm very glad for having a supportive faculty also, by the way. That's something that
Yeah.
I think we very important. The fact that there is supportive faculty really helped the society a lot here.
Yeah.
So, and of course, my amazing counsel. So, yeah. Thank you all of you. And so, I'd like to present you with this memento from behalf of the college.
Okay, thank you so much.